Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. Just 3 things on my list today. Let's talk physics. You know why. And feeling finished. Those are my 3 titles. Let's talk physics. No one wants to look at Pilates No one wants to look at Pilates and understand or hear about why it is what it is, because that gets in the way of making of it whatever you want. Without suffering the distinction between what you make of it and what it is in and of its own right. And that's human nature, and everything changes. So that's why my 3 points about, let's talk about physics, it's new. Someday, talking about Pilates through the eyes of physics will be part of the pressure to see it more clearly, to understand it more deeply, and there's a lot to offer when you look at Pilates through the eyes of physics. It goes beyond what's classical, because it's neoclassical, because what's new is the view of Pilates as an ideal. So neoclassical is classical and something new to me. That's how I understand it. And the neoclassical Pilates, MMP, is a brand of Pilates that's neoclassical. Not the only one, but it certainly is neoclassical. And what makes it different and beyond classical is the ideal that's identified from the point of view. And that ideal that's identified from the point of view goes back to Joe's book. Just the 3 things: definition, promise, and sequence. And so the ideal view is well rooted in Joe's original work. Let's talk physics. God, there's so much. Let's talk gravity. All right? Do you believe it? Do you acknowledge gravity in the world of subjective impressionism? You know, how are you with gravity? Are you flying around willfully on your own? Or do you encounter gravity the same way everybody else does? Because gravity is a uniform field, and that's why we want uniform development, is to mirror the field that we're already in, gravity, and to the extent that we can uniformly distribute the load of our body, it mitigates how heavy we are in space. And there's some physics for you. Throw in dynamic load versus static load, and calculate how heavy is the body when 10% of its musculature is engaged versus how heavy is the body when 90% of the musculature in the body is engaged. Not even talking about how the body is engaged. I think eccentric, I'm talking in my head, I'm thinking about the definition of the ideal, which is uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement, and letting that stimulate my thoughts about the physics of Pilates. Here, the core, at the very most basic thing, the core, establishing control of the core. Well, it's not a clinch, it's not a snowball. The musculature, as literally, but not as distinctively, my hands make a grip in my fist, so too do your hips does the musculature in your trunk and your pelvis make a grip? Can make a grip. Maybe it's just not any grip at all, but the capacity is there, and to the extent that you go from just a squeeze to an involution that makes grip. And that's the whole physics of creating rotation around an axis and all of the inherent physics that comes out of that. Like the definition of the line and the integrity of the line influences the degree of control. How close you get to the diameter that you're making rotation around, how deep is your grip, is an expression of how much control you have. And then alignment. I mean, Joe talks about alignment, and he talks about parallel. He talks about round. The point being that all of these are idealizations within the physics that we live in. When something goes around in a circle, when a mass, an object, goes around in a circle, it's a combination of forces. But there's physics to that, and there's math to the physics. And see, there's where I think no one wants to talk about physics, because they don't want to talk about stuff that they want to ignore, that as though they don't need to know anything about it. And generations of Pilates instructors have taught what they know without ever concerning themselves with why it is what it is, either from not caring or not even considering, or if in consideration not caring. The physics of Pilates is where the essence of Pilates lies, from my point of view, because it's about complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. And in my point of view, that's being, thinking, and observing. And observing connects you with the universe faster than light. Now, I know that sounds preposterous, but usually cutting-edge physics sounds that way. I would refer you to Quantum Reality by Quantum Reality. Not many books titled that. Quantum Reality. The name of the author will come to me, I think. But core new tension, just opposition and rotation between axes. It's completely simple, and it's completely obvious, and it's completely sensational. But until MMP, nobody made a deal about engaging musculature that way. Why? To feel alignment and to trigger uniform usage, or to reach for uniform usage. It's not until you look at Joe's sequence of exercises and what the body is doing, ideally within space, that you get a sense of why it is what it is. First of all, the order acknowledges the space in which it finds itself in, and acknowledges gravity. And that is a progressive loading of the body from supine to standing. That's one example of what we're talking about. It's progressive. And it's progressive within gravity. So loading is a key part of it. Maintaining square hips, straight lines through the limbs. Elongation. See, how do you even get to elongation? How do you even find out or instruct where the neck belongs without core tension? And once understanding core tension, how can you not engage in it? How can you not engage in it to idealize into reality where you think your head belongs in space based on the means of engagement that you have at your disposal? How can you leave out? See, I lost the words already. You don't have to know anything about why Pilates is what it is. You don't have to care about anything about how physics influences the biology that you're trying to progress. So see, I read recently something about how you progress a client. Right? That deserves a title. How do you progress a client? And that's good questions. Of course, my basic question is, what are you progressing them towards? How do you progress? See, the progression is about where you get eventually, as much as how well you get at participating in the moment that you're in. So how do you progress a client? You progress a client by helping them be more coordinated in their being, thinking, and observing in whatever they're doing. But if you want to call it Pilates, it would be nice to see the pattern, the root, at least it would be nice to see some ideal expression of it, if not in itself, by itself. See, I thought I had nothing to say, but then I have all this stuff that I'm saying in it, so by itself. So my number 2 is in quotes with an exclamation mark. How many times does the dialogue get delivered, or does someone say, "You know why," almost as an accusation, or meant to be a statement of fact, but pressed back in some way? You know why. And when I often say, "Know what you know," that's because you know why. You know why. You know why Pilates is what it is, at least through the MMP point of view. And through that point of view, Why is Pilates what it is? Well, it comes from a guy's name, Joseph Pilates, and anybody I ever met that knew him described him as a survivor, and that lets me extend his method as being survival training. And so, why is Pilates what it is? It is to help you survive. It's survival training. You know why, or you're willing to understand or look at why Pilates, there you go, you're willing to look at why Pilates is what it is without being threatened about who you are and who you know. All of the who you are and who you know is part of the fabric of the culture, but there is what you can know regardless of who. That can make a big difference, in my opinion, as to how well you survive and thrive as a Pilates instructor. And knowing why is beyond just abstractions like survival, but knowing that there's an experience that is your target. How many points of view just evaporate when you're looking for a point of view of Pilates that aims for an experience, a specific experience, in the course of the lesson, no matter who the lesson is with or taught by. That's one point of view. So life can't live forever. Oh, know what you know. Feeling finished. Hold on. Hold on. It's the first time I've ever walked off of a set during a broadcast. Apologize for that, but I had a mute fall off, and I wasn't going to try to concentrate and finish what I had to say without at least establishing that quiet. You know why. You're after the experience. And that's possible in the moment. And all of this is within the MLP point of view. And in knowing why, then you know how, you know what you're aiming for, and you know how to hit it. And you know that observing has nothing to do with intellectual interpretation of spiritualism. Spirit in the MMP point of view is observing. It's what exists beyond the prefrontal cortex of thinking, and probably, not necessarily, but probably is the amygdala, hippocampal, baser parts of the brain that are the sensational interaction, the observing that happens, the input of data from outside the organism. That's different than thinking. And in the fact that Joe makes the distinction of body, mind, and spirit, MMP makes an assignment of being, thinking, and observing. And see, when you know that, it's really hard to get coordination of those three things, especially if you don't know what you're asking for, or the nature of the capacities that you're trying to coordinate. It can be very delightful for someone who's over-engaged in one capacity to find an expression within themselves and a capacity to coordinate within themselves more capacity than they're used to exerting. Getting more control from exerting more capacities. You know why. So you know why. And that's why number 3, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling finished, I think. I think I'm feeling finished. I think I've said what I've had to say, and still people that think they hear what I say. Maybe it's just the weather and the big shock of going from short sleeves on the balcony to everything closed up and hot water heat throughout. It's nice, but it's definitely creating a temperature barrier between the weather out there and the weather here, which brings us to survival, where we started. And imparting that one of the most frequent pieces of feedback I've come up with for oftentimes, in many occasions, is that you can't deny a person their right to suffer. And so it's, as much as you don't want to see them suffer, you can't deny them their right to, especially if they're an adult, right? And hopefully, as a parent, you are enough of a guardian with your children that you allow them to experience suffering from their choices without having them be impactful or long-lasting or scarring, you know, non-consequential. Well, consequential to the point of learning, but not consequential to the point of deterring. You get what I mean. So, life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking. Geist